my name is Johanna Morariu, and I am the Deputy Director of the Strategy Learning and Evaluation Department at the Walton Family Foundation. Our team supports the foundation to collect and use information from many sources in service of developing learning and insights so that our strategies are nimble, adapt, and reflect what we know. Today, we have the pleasure of sharing findings from an evaluation of the Walton Family Foundation's COVID Relief Fund. To share more about the project, what we learned, and how the foundation is using the results, I'm joined by our evaluation partner, Jessica Manta-Meyer of Public Profit. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Johanna. So glad to be here. My name is Jessica Manta-Meyer, and I'm the Managing Director of Public Profit. We're an evaluation and strategy consulting firm based in Oakland, California.
Great, Jess. Well, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your partnership over the last year as we've worked on this project together. So we partnered with your team to better understand and learn from our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So in a nutshell, our questions focused on what we can learn from this unique experience to inform future efforts. And, just thinking back to what got us started, we read a great blog post by your team about what funders and nonprofits should be asking themselves. And that really kind of focused our planning efforts and set us on the path here today. And so we ended up, keying in on 4 questions. The first about just describing our grant making approach and also documenting the fund's accomplishments. The second was understanding the extent to which we supported grantee financial sustainability. The third was understanding how this experience strengthened relationships between the foundation and grantee partners. And the fourth was capturing feedback and suggestions for how to modify our grant making approach, either in emergency situations or everyday grant making going forward. So, your team helped us dig into these questions. Tell us more about how you collected information and some of the key takeaways that you were able to get to.
Yeah. Well, for the evaluation, we drew on 4 data sources. So we looked at grant documentation, grant applications, and also reports and performance metrics. We interviewed several grantees across all 3 program areas. We had multiple conversations with staff, interview focus group type conversations, again, across all program areas. And we fielded a survey to all the COVID Relief Fund grantees. And we found some really exciting things. So based on what we heard, first and foremost, the grants provided significant support to people and communities. The grants directly reached over 800,000 children and 35,000 households and provided nearly 170,000 meals and over 65,000 PPE products, which were so important back then. And the foundation's COVID Relief Fund grants were timely and needed. They got to grantees before PPP, Payroll Protection Program loans, were available, providing much needed cash flow to maintain organizational functioning. Also, the grant supported long-term groundwork in the form of staff retention and organizational infrastructure investments. And they reinforced the foundation's partnership with their grantees. Finally, the COVID Relief Fund experience provides an excellent opportunity for learning about the trade-offs, polarities required for such relief funding, which can strengthen the foundation's strategic response to future emergencies.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll talk about a bit more about those polarities in just a moment. We looked at these and just saw, the super exciting and very positive findings that came through here. And your team was able to really highlight the amazing work of the foundation's grantee partners. And, in addition to some of those impressive achievements you've already just mentioned, your team also found that over 25,000 technological devices were purchased and distributed, such as Wi-Fi hotspots for all those students who are now doing their schoolwork from home and needing internet access. Over 1,500 news stories and social media posts, 75 research and journalism projects, and over 150 trainings and webinars supported. So really trying to share information and develop insights that can help teachers and communities and others navigate the time of COVID-19. And also over 277 million visits or views of content or media developed. So really getting that information out there and sharing it widely. And we know all this because our grantee partners collect and share metrics data, which was something your team poured over in this evaluation process, which was really great and enabled us to really get this concrete picture of amazing effort at this time. So for those of you joining us today, we'd welcome you to drop in the chat. If you received a COVID emergency grant, how did you use it? We'd love to know more from folks who are joining us here today. So through the evaluation, we learned that our grantees had a greater impact on their community because they received the foundation's COVID relief funds and helped beneficiaries achieve better outcomes than they would have otherwise. So I read that to mean that our funds really were able to support grantee partners to carry out their programming and advance their missions, which is great and is exactly what we had hoped to see. And we'd also hoped that our funds would support organizational financial sustainability. What did your team learn about that?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think I want to acknowledge the emotional relief that these grants provided. The onset of the pandemic was a time of great fear, great uncertainty, and the COVID Relief Fund grants help grantees feel less fearful, less uncertain. And this was shared somewhat indirectly with us, but this helped grantees make better organizational decisions because they could make decisions from a stronger place. But more directly, our data showed that it improved the financial outlook, the financial sustainability for many. Many could retain staff and continue program, whereas they had been worried about that at the start of the pandemic. And for some, it protected them against from making risky financial decisions like dipping into their reserves. But this also looked different for different grantees based on their program models or their revenue models, and some it really just moved through the organization and out into communities based on their model. So a lot of different things going on. I'm curious, Johanna, what is the foundation taking away from the experience and this evaluation? What was learned, and what will the foundation carry forward in case of future emergency grant making?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the heart of the project, right? Of kind of identifying those learnings and lessons for the future. So through this project, we came to realize there are at least 3 key polarities or dynamic tensions in our emergency response grant making. And this is something we've talked about over the course of the project and kind of started to discover as we got into the analysis stage together. And, for those of you who are newer to polarity thinking, polarities are 2 interdependent values that exist in a given situation. They're not right or wrong, but by being aware of them, we can better understand what we are prioritizing and the choices that we make. And this was something that was really helpful for us to kind of unearth through this project and realize so that we can be more purposeful about how we make these choices in the future. So the first polarity was whether it was better to act fast and possibly miss some high impact opportunities that might come later, or act slow and risk failing to meet urgent grantee needs. And we prioritized getting funds out the door quickly. It just seemed like a time of immense need and uncertainty. And so that was a value we leaned into, was moving faster and not necessarily, figuring out all of the end game of the COVID relief fund. We simplified our grant application process. We prioritized getting money out the door as quickly as possible. And like you mentioned, we were able to get much of our funds out the door before the Paycheck Protection Program funding reached our grantees. And so it was a really important lifeline for many of our grantee partners. That obviously came with trade-offs. And so, we probably missed some opportunities to support COVID relief in later stages. So that's something we're thinking about for the future. Your team really helped us think about that. And, probably in the future, set aside some funds that we can use as the emergency evolves so that we can continue to be a partner even in later stages. The second polarity is whether to be more responsive and seek to alleviate the immediate challenges, or to be more strategic in our funding. And, we really value strategy, and we have a new strategic plan that was kind of coming into play in the midst of the pandemic. And we sought to do both. And we were responsive. You mentioned the numbers around funding meals and PPE and other emergency needs. And that was something we thought was really important in the moment. And we were also excited that many of our COVID relief grants also advanced our strategic goals. So I think the education program has some great examples of funding different kinds of education innovations, learning pods and hybrid approaches that were really important in COVID, and they'll continue to be important beyond the pandemic. And so that's exciting to think about this ripple effect of the kinds of both responsive and strategic investments we were able to make at the time. And the third polarity is whether to focus on working with existing grantees or to seek out new partners. And this is one we've talked about a number of times of the choices that we made here. And largely in service of speed, we worked with existing grantee partners where we had established relationships and trust, and we felt like we could just move quicker with those organizations. And by doing this, we leaned into, moving at that speed and limiting risk. But we also think it may have limited our impact and are thinking about in future emergency response situations, how we could cast a broader net and consider new grantee partners so that we are able to capitalize on the great skills and different community relationships those organizations may bring. So I think, those are some of the things we've learned. There's more in the report, obviously, but just really appreciate the partnership with you and your team over the last year to dig into this important project and to help us get to some learnings that will inform our efforts going forward. So Jessica, thank you so much for the partnership and all the great work that your team has done with us.